Nobody's going to see hazard. As things stand, we're watching, well, one of the bombings that happened today over there in Lebanon. That's what's happening in the world. Well, let's get into the details. Let's go to the map because the Strait of Hormuz is closed again. And well, it's a situation that didn't last at all. Absolutely, absolutely. There's no ceasefire anymore. There are already attacks. And well, also, what stands out is that the attack could also be coming from another place. Well, different from what had been seen in this conflict. I mean, a country that would be joining the war. How have you been? Well, that wasn't the headline. It wasn't the headline we had. Well, it just changed on us, you noticed. But well, that's how the news is, right? It's constantly changing, and well, here we try to adapt to the latest information as we do every day. The situation has taken a dramatic turn because now it is suspected, and this is a developing story, that the United Arab Emirates might also be launching attacks against Iran. This would also show that the Arab countries are in total disagreement with this situation. Several analysts, including those from Israel whom we will discuss shortly, have said that this is a disaster. In other words, the agreement is a disaster. Let's go. It would only further empower Iran. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is trying to save the narrative. He came out to criticize the media, and he criticized the media again. We're going to see it right now. Saying, no, the whole deal is fine, everything is fine. Clearly, that's not the case. Let's get into the details of what's happening. It's quite a dramatic turn. Look, it says the following in this report. It says, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz in response to Israeli attacks against Lebanon, according to Iranian state media. The aggression, according to what it says towards Lebanon, is an aggression towards Iran, says General Mousavi, commander of the Revolutionary Guard Aerospace Force. And about that topic, what Israel itself says is, well, we are not part of that agreement. We are not at that point. We never accepted anything involving Lebanon. And Donald Trump himself says the same thing. That agreement there, at that point, hadn't been discussed, says Donald Trump. They weren't in the agreement. Donald Trump claims that Israel's attacks against Hezbollah in Lebanon are a skirmish separate from the war against the United States and Iran. Iran has disrupted the navigation of oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, and immediately the effects on oil prices are starting to be felt. They were already close to $91, and now, well, they're back up to $94, almost $95. We'll see if this starts to skyrocket, but for now it's staying below 100, which is already something, and it's important. It had already been more than a week, about 2 weeks or so, without being below 100, and well, that's also interesting. According to Fars, this Iranian media outlet, this morning 2 oil tankers were allowed to pass without any problems. After that, the Strait of Hormuz was closed again. At this moment, it is reportedly closed, according to reports, due to what happened in Lebanon. But also, let's see, it's not just that. Saudi Arabia claims that they have been shooting down drones coming from Iran. In other words, Iran's attacks have continued, and if they didn't shoot them down, well, they would be. Would we still be seeing explosions inside Saudi Arabia? But there are also reports of attacks against Iran, which so far, although not confirmed, are suspected to come from the United Arab Emirates. There is data indicating that it wouldn't be the United States, nor would it be Israel, but rather, in any case, it would be from the United Arab Emirates. In the meantime, well, without showing the image, let's look at this topic. Dozens of buildings are said to have been affected. This happened over there. Well, they say it's the worst. The worst bombing, the worst airstrike that has happened there in Lebanon in recent years. That's how serious it is. I mean, the thing is that these attacks are already starting to escalate. I think this shows it better, right? Because that previous image doesn't really show it as much. But I want you to see the level of destruction that's happening in Lebanon. Let's see if we can observe it here. Notice how big the building is and see the one that's half destroyed, right? It is destroyed, and according to reports, well, this is directly affecting Lebanese civilians. A topic that had been handled with relative care. but now they are saying that this is reaching a level similar to that of Gaza. Let's say it's heading in that direction. According to what they're reporting right now, well, we're seeing a shift and acceleration toward conflict, in which the attacks are no longer being carried out with the restraint they had shown toward Lebanon, telling them, warning them with enough time, there's going to be an attack exactly at this point, evacuate, and so on and so forth. All this stuff we already know about. Meanwhile, from Israel, an academic named Joselale Alvarez, who is with the Times of Israel, makes a statement and a warning, which also caught my attention today, and I think is key to understanding the perspective from an academic and a former IDF officer. And he issues a warning saying that Iran would be the main beneficiary of the ceasefire that is being promoted by our side. According to the analysis, far from ending the conflict, the truce would have consolidated key positions for Tehran. The agreement negotiated with Pakistan's mediation would have given Iran a strategic breather that it hasn't had since '79, basically since the Revolutionary Guard has existed and all of this started. This agreement would be the most beneficial that they could have for that country, specifically for the regime. The ceasefire does not mean the end of the war, but rather a pause that could allow for the reconfiguration of forces and alliances. There are also questions about whether the role itself manages to deactivate the underlying conflict, and, well, because of this, there will be an even more dangerous aftermath. The analysis also suggests that regional actors could reinterpret this move as a sign of Western weakness, and this is being pushed by China through Pakistan, which is what's being claimed now, and that's an issue that, well, so far hasn't been confirmed. But if this is the case, well, it would be tremendous that the oil tankers might possibly be selling the oil that comes out of there. And the money paid to pass through, all that money that's going to be changing hands, it wouldn't be in dollars, it would be in Chinese currency. I mean, we're talking about all of this switching to yuan. And that would also have another effect. Also, something that's not being considered in this matter, if this is confirmed in that sense, I mean, there are several winners here, but in this case, at least in this move, it wouldn't be the United States or Israel. Another analysis comes from Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, who claims that all these ruptures happening right now are ultimately benefiting Russia. According to the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, he has raised alarms in Europe after making a direct statement. What is happening now, the current dynamics, everything going on right now in Ukraine, the control, everything related to NATO, what they have against NATO, or the issue in the Middle East, all of this, he says, all these dynamics are Vladimir Putin's dream plan and nothing more. Now there's a lot of pressure. Now I will be able to sell my oil separately. I'm going to sell it at a high price. NATO is weakened. The US is practically at odds with Europe. Everything is turning out perfectly for one place in the world. The Kremlin is fascinated. I mean, they must be applauding everything that's happening. And besides this, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Well, after being in a nightmare for the past year, Vladimir Putin is waking up and he's in a dream. So he's really excited, says Donald Trump. Another critical point is the energy crisis that it's causing in Europe. It's increasing the continent's dependence and vulnerability. Tusk warns about the suspension or weakening of aid to Ukraine. They withdraw aid to Ukraine, it's at odds with NATO. The energy crisis is creating a high demand and a high price for gas and oil. What else? This blockade creates internal tensions within the European Union and makes it difficult to have a unified response to Russia. Everyone's message suggests that these are not isolated events, but rather pieces that fit into a broader geopolitical strategy. All these moves are benefiting Russia. Europe is facing a decisive moment where unity and division will determine the course of the conflict. And while it's interesting what Poland says, Keep in mind, Donald Tusk and Poland are super close allies of the United States. In fact, I could say that in Europe, even above the United Kingdom right now, Poland has been a super ally of the United States. I mean, the one who sells the most, buys the most from the United States, the one who is preparing the most, the one who invests the most in military matters. Come on, I mean, they constantly defend the decisions that get stuck. But this time, well, they said, look, this is taking a very serious turn. It's creating a situation that benefits Russia. In this case, well, a broader strategy, let's say a strategy that goes beyond a war or a conflict. But basically a new order, basically a new way of seeing the world, in which the United States is giving much more importance, much more weight than China and other countries to Russia itself. And above Europe and above NATO and above all the allies that the United States itself has. Another issue that also draws attention within all this mess is that this wave of airstrikes against Hezbollah is taking place. Not by chance. The US and Israel measured their calculations and their actions, they said. Let's see what I can do that also breaks the agreements, because obviously we saw it yesterday. He doesn't agree at all on the matter. And there was, well, an operation in suits, quick, strong, massive, the biggest one, to make it clear that we don't agree, and I think that's been made pretty clear. Iran's response also shows one thing: this agreement with Iran is done. It's only for one thing, to put pressure when they need to do it, and they already did it on day one, I mean the Strait of Hormuz. Since it's controlled by them, they can close or open it on the day, at the moment, and at the very second they need to. And right now they said there were attacks, so the strait is closed and you can do whatever you want, but the strait is closed. So, well, I think it was also a way to move or position this idea, for Israel to tell the US, look closely at what will happen at the first move the Iranians disagree with. By the way, the leader of the Israeli opposition has also criticized the ceasefire, saying that this is a failure. And this is what Yair Lapid says. Let's see what the Israeli opposition says, because this also draws attention. And look, let's put up the image so you can identify him. He'll report on it. Let's discuss it in detail. The leader of the Israeli opposition reportedly criticized the ceasefire with Iran, claiming that this would be a political and strategic failure for Netanyahu. The leader of the Israeli opposition, Yair Lapid, was forceful in his criticism this Wednesday. Never before in history have we witnessed, he says, such a political disaster. He writes and requested in a statement, arguing that Israel didn't even participate in the discussions when decisions regarding national security were made, and that, well, makes sense. The United States didn't take Israel into account, didn't put it on the table, it used Pakistan, and in any case, by putting Pakistan, you're automatically putting China as well. We have to remember, Pakistan and China have a very strong alliance, and while they are the ones who ultimately made the decision. Lapid warns, it will take us years to repair the political and strategic damage that Netanyahu caused due to arrogance, negligence, and lack of strategic planning. The president of the National Security Committee of the Knesset, of the parliament, by the way, and member of the right-wing party, Esma Januzat. Deputy Yaviga Fogel also reacted to the ceasefire, announcing that Trump had chickened out. So, on one hand, Lapid says, come on, they totally disagree with the agreement, but on the other hand, the right wing, the extreme right within Israel, says Donald Trump is a coward. That is at least the internal message or the position that other sectors in Israel have, which also needs to be analyzed. We already more or less know what Netanyahu said. Netanyahu can't openly say that he disagrees. He has made it clear through his words and actions, such as attacking Lebanon. All of that is the way we're going to find out that he's not. He's not going to do it directly because it's not convenient for him. Meanwhile, let's move on to other matters. But according to the Ministry of Defense of Saudi Arabia, they reportedly intercepted, look, I said there were 4. That makes 9 drones in the last few hours, according to the Saudi statement. It says that the Ministry of Defense of that country has already intercepted 9 Iranian drones so far. Iran has now launched drone and missile attacks against all the Gulf neighbors. In the hours since the ceasefire began, they have continued launching attacks. So, well, the thing is that there isn't an agreement. I mean, there really isn't an agreement that's being followed. Sometimes right now don't they say that they haven't just attacked us, but also the Gulf countries, but I don't have the information on how many attacks on the other countries or anything, because we only know about Saudi Arabia. But they have information that the Gulf countries have continued to be attacked not only with drones, but also with missiles. And this would show that the agreement, even before the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and all of this, the conflict continues, the war continues, and the agreement is just kind of above it. It's not really in place. Both sides published it, but that's it. Hazard. Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz after being open for hours. Any ship, it says, that passes through there, let's go to Iran's statement. It says any ship that passes through the Strait of Hormuz will be destroyed. This is reported by an Iranian media outlet called Fars, which details that simultaneously with Israel's attacks on Lebanon, the passage of oil tankers through Hormuz has been completely stopped. If any ship passes through there, it will be destroyed. It says any vessel that tries to enter the sea will be hazard. And what we see is that everywhere there's no way for things to be anything but hazard. All the fire just to get a sense of position, said Trump. By today he had toned it down, he had toned down the narrative a bit. About this matter, about this topic, Trump made a post about it a little while ago, in which he claims that, in negotiations there are also many frauds, many charlatans, that there are points they don't agree on, that there are only a few points they do agree on. In other words, he changed his stance. He says there is only a group of significant points that are acceptable to the United States, and we will discuss them behind closed doors during the negotiations. That was said by Donald Trump. Well, in fact, it's published by the White House itself on the official White House website. That's where at 10 in the morning, it's 12 now, so 2 hours ago, they published this, but a lot of things happened during that period. Among them, the closure of Hormuz. 2 hours ago, the White House was still saying the same thing. They were saying there are some points we could talk about regarding all of this. There are some significant points that are acceptable. I mean, as if saying a good part of the points that Iran mentions or puts forward are not acceptable. Today it became known during all these negotiations that these points, which are supposed to be addressed, weren't even considered for acceptance. I mean, basically it was more like taking a breather, to buy some time, maybe, perhaps to negotiate something different later on. But for years, decades, it has been proven that it's impossible to negotiate certain points. Or the issue of enrichment now, another topic that has also become an issue. Supposedly, the main point is the control of the Strait of Hormuz, which would be controlled by Iran together with Oman. Oman would be another one to receive part of the money collected in that strait, and that money would supposedly be used to rebuild what was affected by this war. Besides, it's not just about collecting money, but they would also decide who gets charged and who doesn't. Which countries can't pass through here even if they pay? So basically, having absolute control over the Strait of Hormuz and what the United States is selling, or what Trump specifically says, is that we are also going to receive a payment. Well, Iran doesn't talk about that. Iran doesn't say anything about that at all. And they would be the ones who are actually controlling it because they control it right now. So, that's also an important issue. Let's go to this comment made by that same guy, the Secretary of War, who says the following.
He chose mercy. He spared those targets because Iran accepted the ceasefire under overwhelming pressure. The new Iranian regime understood that a deal was much better than the fate that awaited them. This new regime simply watched what happened to their predecessors. Their top leadership was systematically eliminated. The prior Iranian supreme leader was killed. The secretary of the Supreme National Security Council was killed. The advisor to the office of the supreme leader was killed.
Well, that's the message he himself gives. And he also reacts to this comment, if you can hear it. Yes.
Well, thank you for the question. The president mentioned the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, those who have fought side by side with us, especially in defense of our facilities, our people, their facilities, and we appreciate it. So that coordination, of course, will continue and
Well, so that coordination will continue according to this. Well, that's also evidence. We have to remember that there at the White House, at the Pentagon, etc., what they do is have journalists from different parts of the world asking questions, and they make room for questions about all countries. Many times they are related to the conflict. So that's why the questions are also being directed towards the United Arab Emirates or other countries in the Middle East. Also, all right, this message is given during this press conference. Listen to this.
One-way attack, one-way. One-way attack. So far, we've intercepted 1,700 one-way attack. One-way attack. Attack. Defending our forces, our partners, and the civilian population, and we remain prepared to do so if the need arises. Along the way, we consumed more than 6 million meals. And according to my calculations, more than 950,000 gallons of coffee, 2 million energy drinks, and a lot of nicotine. But I'm not saying we have a problem. Thank you.
Well, speaking of the impressive amount of food, it's impressive how much they eat and smoke. Apparently, I didn't know what they were offering them. I mean, they also gave them cigarettes. I don't know. Well, I guess that's what they mean by nicotine, right? I suppose so. I find it even more curious, don't you think? But anyway, I mean, I know that inside aircraft carriers and all that, they have their McDonald's, they have certain brands. They don't know McDonald's, not Uva and one of those brands. But anyway, this is obviously just to attract attention. Now, meanwhile, the regime that Trump talks about is more relaxed, it's more easygoing. Well, this is the message the Iranians themselves are sending with this video they uploaded. Listen to this, talking about the judiciary of Iran. Let's listen.
In the midst of a situation of total war with all this violence, it's worth seriously asking whether luck has intervened in some way or not. Honestly, it seems to me that, Mr. Karibi, we should proceed to issue a greater number of judicial rulings, both in relation to the confiscation of property and the issuing of death sentences. Please really speed up these processes. For those who can be sentenced, as you say, it's not even necessary. Don't make it harsher. After all, the law allows it. Also sentence them and announce it too.
So, they're already speeding up, I don't know what you call it, the death sentences for everyone. This one who has, well, become emboldened and has protested against the regime. Well, they might possibly be taking their lives, right? And besides, a large percentage at least publish them. They put us like that on television so people can see how they end up there. Well, it's a terrible subject. Let's move on to other matters as well, important ones.
Yesterday, on the president's Truth Social, he threatened to wipe out a civilization. That statement caused a huge reaction in the United States. If Iran didn't come to the negotiating table and make a deal yesterday before the deadline, was the president really prepared to wipe out Iran completely?
As I said, we had a target set, ready to strike. Infrastructure, bridges, power plants. Remember, this is a terrorist regime, a military regime. All these dual-use items to fund their army, to fund their terrorist campaigns. We had many legitimate targets. They knew exactly the extent of what we were capable of doing. We attacked some military targets in CAG, which is a kind of signal. They can't defend it. And so, Iran finally understood its capability, its future, to produce, to generate energy, to fuel its terrorist regime. It was in our hands. It was in President Trump's hands. That's why they came to the negotiating table. He finally said, "We can take it from you. Everything from you. You will no longer be able to export energy, and the United States military can attack those targets with impunity." That kind of threat was what brought them to the point where, effectively, they said, "All right, we want to close this deal."
Trying to justify exactly that issue. Trying to justify how basically President Trump himself threatened them. He essentially said he would erase them and make them disappear. A matter that has been harshly criticized because this also has two sides to it. This also gives radical groups, or even people within Iran itself, grounds to say, hey, they want to wipe us out. This is an existential issue. So the minimum rules of war are completely broken. And then they start thinking about other kinds of operations, other kinds of attacks as well. And that also, well, obviously creates more risks. Let's move on to other important matters happening in the world. But there is already a report on what the numbers are from these bombings that have taken place and that we saw at the beginning towards Lebanon. It's been really, really tough. I mean, these attacks that have happened have really surprised everyone in a completely negative way. Because these are attacks that are happening where there is a civilian population without any warning. As is usually done, 254 people have lost their lives, 800 injured. This is just in the first hours of counting. Obviously, there could be many more. The defense forces claimed they bombed 100 targets at the same time. According to their reports, the strikes targeted command centers, maritime attack systems, and artillery used by the militia that supports Iran. But also command centers, and many of these are close to, well, from what can be seen, civilian buildings, and that's the problem. The Israel Defense Forces reported that they carried out these attacks all within 10 minutes. It was a massive sudden attack in which there are already hundreds of dead and more than 1,000 injured, and well, obviously that's awful. The thing is that many of these command centers are known to be in the middle of the city. They're there. It's an example. And what Israelis usually do is send flyers, send messages through cell phones. In minutes, there will be an attack in this area. Get 500 meters away, or sometimes when an attack is very large, 1 kilometer away. And people leave. That's why we see so many videos of those attacks. Because people already know where the attack is, and people are recording. They're waiting for the attack and recording. And you can see how people are very calm, recording. But when they attack unexpectedly, that's a different story. That's another matter entirely. I mean, both attacks look like attacks. They're affecting civilian areas. But when there are fewer civilian casualties, well, obviously the attack was carried out or planned with a bit more humanity in mind, even though they're still terrible from a legal standpoint. Obviously, this is against or goes beyond international laws. Hey, what is a terrorist attack on a terrorist group? Well, obviously it's a group that also carries out attacks against Israel. It's a topic that's still being discussed right now, and up to now, it still obligates them. Lebanon's commitments, which were to dismantle or take away Hezbollah's weapons, have not been fulfilled. A commitment that was precisely to prevent these bombings. Or ideally, it would have been for Lebanon itself, I mean the Lebanese government, to take away their weapons. They haven't been able to, or they haven't wanted to. That's the situation. Now, this could have many more consequences than expected, because now we're going to see Trump's reaction. Who is really controlling the conflict? Is it being controlled by Iran? Is it controlled by the United States? Or is it controlled by Israel? That's the big question, isn't it? Trump says that Iran will not be able to enrich uranium, and that the United States is going to remove the nuclear waste buried in its facilities. Let me tell you right now, that's a topic that is completely unacceptable to Iran. They have repeated it and said it many times, especially the group that is currently in power, Mojtaba Khamenei, and those figures are even much more radical than the previous ones. So, well, I don't know if they haven't told him either. That's a problem, isn't it? And then suddenly they send things to Trump. Well, just to agree with him and not to inform him properly. The US president says Iran won't be able to enrich uranium and that the US will work with Tehran to extract and remove waste from underground sites, which is not true. They've already repeated and commented on it. Go check the Iranian media, where they tell their people that enrichment will continue. Not only that they are not going to take any uranium away, but also that they are going to continue. So they will keep going with that. So, well, that issue shows that no, the agreement isn't going to happen, right? Also, that's true. What there is euphoria. What there is calm. The world's stock markets went up. The European stock markets, the American stock markets, all the stock markets went up, but tremendously. Look. This is yesterday's value. Look at the jump it made from yesterday to today. Impressive. So the markets breathed a sigh of relief over this, right? They said up, up, up. This is the S&P 500. Here's what we're seeing. Nasdaq rose too, but not as much. This is the Nasdaq. It had been rising for days and Nasdaq is up too. We're saying European stock markets went up, as did the Nikkei. The Japanese stock market. It was the big surge. Also impressive. I mean, the Nikkei surge, China. Let's look at China. Well, an increase. Well, okay. No. Impressive, really. South Korea. Because, well, it was here. It jumped all the way here. The jump is also important. And over there we have Hong Kong. Hong Kong also has a significant increase. There it is, right? Mexican stock market, right? Since we're at it, let's check it out. Well, it's also going up. It's not going down, more or less. Either way, it's been on an upward trend for several days now. 2 negative days, but with an upward trend. And today, apparently positive. At least up until now, right? Well, I mean, no. Let's move on to other matters. Helpless. It turns out there was an earthquake in a very unusual area. It draws attention. An earthquake. At this point, this is the earthquake. Well, so far it's the biggest one in the last 24 hours in the whole world. Yes. An unusual area. Normally, well, you know that earthquakes happen in the Ring of Fire. Obviously, sometimes there are other seismic zones. There's Italy, for example. It's over there, towards Puerto Rico, which has become a... No. But this time, well, this earthquake. What we're seeing here happened in the Caspian Sea. There it is, Iran, on this side. On this side is Georgia, yes. This is Azerbaijan. Actually, no, because it no longer reaches the Caspian Sea or area, the lake usually. It's actually Azerbaijan. Between Azerbaijan and Iran. There's an earthquake. Strange, weird. No. Besides, it was 10 kilometers deep. The earthquake was 5.6. An area? Curious, unusual to see, no. And that, well, it's not. Not only it's not common, but also earthquakes don't usually happen, even less so at that depth, in that region. It's strange to see an earthquake like that. Apparently there was no damage. That's what's being reported, at least so far. We'll see if more information comes later. There's suspicion of something else because maybe they're testing something, maybe some kind of device. No, that's not it, because for it to be shallow, the earthquake would have to be hundreds of meters, not 10 kilometers, if the depth data is correct. So far, 10 kilometers, we'll see if they change it. But that's how it is, surface. 10 kilometers is too much, so it wouldn't be considered shallow. Another topic, no, there would be possibilities of that, at least with the information that we have right now. That's also important. Let's go. Well, to other matters. In the meantime, the Financial Times reports that Armageddon, by the way, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the super chat, Sylvia. Sending you warm regards and my thanks, and to the whole community that supports us with a super chat. By becoming a member, subscribing, and leaving a like, all of that obviously helps the channel. The Financial Times basically says this. It was edited. Armageddon. Inside, okay, many things could be criticized, but for now, at least. Hey, maybe. I'm looking at the comments here. Yes, right? Obviously. The risk not only will continue, but it will increase. I mean, it's being, like, swept under the rug with the problem piling up there. But on the other hand, also, you're right. This one. Point. This comment that Armageddon was edited because what followed was a step with unprecedented consequences. No, to a level that we don't know where everything would go. I mean, really, the next step was already a very serious problem. Even, they report the threat of a total war in the Persian Gulf seemed imminent at one point. Maybe the troops were going to have to go in, that it was also going to have to happen. On another level, let's say, not necessarily nuclear, but there are some that are still at an intermediate point because the idea was supposedly to wipe it off the map. That's what was said by Donald Trump. Ahora. Now, according to what Gideon Rachman, chief foreign affairs columnist for the Financial Times, reports, the prospect of an Armageddon has been set aside, even if just for a moment it has been put aside. Armageddon was cancelled, at least for now, says the analysis by the chief foreign affairs columnist at the Financial Times. That's good. I found it interesting. Among the analyses I've been able to see, I found this point interesting. That too. Well, let's not forget that maybe the worst case scenario of all was avoided, possibly today, well, if they left a much more empowered regime. I understand all this, but what if it's true? I mean, they're letting a terrible situation grow there. And you understand that part, but you also understand the other side, which was, well, financial Armageddon, even energy Armageddon. Yesterday, an analyst said, sorry, I forgot his name. But you can check it out on the podcast, The Diary of a CEO. If not, there's an analyst who's specialized in all these topics. What did he say? In about 90 days, you would start to see famine in certain countries. I mean, the consequences are really harsh, right? Really harsh. So many times mistreatment is even worse. The end of many things. So, if the situation is really serious, let's move on to other important points as well. 191 military political prisoners are waiting to be covered by the amnesty law. It draws attention. We're talking about Mexico here, right? Obviously, according to what is being said, the amnesty law has had no impact on the situation of military personnel considered political prisoners, according to Delatos. This, at least according to what is being pointed out right now, is that it exists. Well, either they report fraud or abandonment of certain military personnel. They are not protected since they are military political prisoners and they are seeking amnesty. Wouldn't it be Venezuela? No, sorry, the amnesty according to what it is in Venezuela. It's already a topic we've talked about several times. Venezuela has a problem because within the military, anyone is a suspect, in quotes. Considered prisoners according to what has been warned. Amnesty is being, according to what is being warned. Suspected of disagreeing or of having voted against at the time of the elections that took place, they detained many military personnel because supposedly they didn't agree with Maduro, right? And among them, there are detainees who, despite this amnesty, are not released. They say you have to release them because that's what was agreed with the United States, but they refuse, claiming it only applies to civilians, not military. So it's obviously a huge problem, and I honestly don't think we're going to see it resolved anytime soon. Unfortunately, for those families who are waiting for their soldiers to be released, this isn't it. It's not going to happen soon. They're playing along with Trump in their own way. They're not saying yes to everything, but they're not giving him any dates or anything either. And well, we already know how this goes, right? That's another point as well. Sometimes they get lost in the comments or in the wishes that the leaders have. In this case, Trump is one thing and reality is something else. Or things don't just work to favor this person or any other leader. There are too many interests involved. In this case, not even specifically in Venezuela. There are power groups that are still there. Even the Rodriguez themselves are there trying to do everything possible to solidify their position and stay there as long as they can. They're not thinking about elections. They're not thinking at all about giving up power. On the contrary. That's very clear. Another thing that also draws attention is that there's a tremendous cold alert coming because of Arctic air. Let's get into the details. Let's go to the map. This event, as it's called, looks like this right now. The Arctic air is going to cause a problem for about 45 million people in the United States who, well, will have to deal with this issue, right? We already see it as a very unusual April, an April where even here in northeastern Mexico it hasn't been cold, but it has been cool, right? I've had to go out 2 or 3 times wearing jackets, remember? For that same reason, right? The meteorological authorities have issued widespread warnings due to the risk of frost that could even affect crops and infrastructure. According to the National Weather Service and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, they say that the phenomenon will be present in the coming days, and with this supposed start of the thaw, it will bring very cold, freezing temperatures, with temperatures dropping to around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, to 34 more or less, between -6 degrees Celsius and 1 degree Celsius. This is for the north, especially in the United States. NOAA says that late drops in temperature pose risks for agriculture and local infrastructure, which requires greater preparation by emergency services. According to their reports, the causes of this cold episode in April are still being studied, but what they do say, well, is that this phenomenon comes, by the way, from air coming from Canada, from the North Pole. Basically, it's a phenomenon that is not very common for this time of year. The Water Prediction Center explains that the polar vortex is a current of cold air located at high latitudes that remained more active than usual. The cold wave is going to cause low below zero temperatures in New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, the Ohio Valley, and New England. It has impacted states like Nebraska, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Belmont, among other states that I won't mention here, but they are indeed well, we also see within this the possibility that there will still be some areas with snowfall in the coming days, mainly in the west. Still snowfalls at this time of year, right? And if we look at it from the point of view of rain, right? The accumulation of rain over the next 4 or 5 days also extends into the southern United States and the northeastern United States. There too, and even here, we're also going to get some rain, by the way. Vienen tormentas eléctricas. They are mainly toward Mexico. The central and southern parts of Mexico will have thunderstorms, and the same goes for Central America, by the way. Toward Guadalajara, Guatemala, El Salvador, and the Pacific, there will also be thunderstorms, and of course for Venezuela and Colombia as well, right? Strong storms are also expected, by the way, in northern Venezuela and northern Colombia as well, right? Northwest Venezuela, which is this area, and northwest Colombia, which is this whole region, and also toward the border with Panama, where Panama will also get some strong storms there. Well, in general, for Brazil, there's a lot of rain, many possible storms, but if you go south, at least in terms of storms, there's not much chance for Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, all of that. No, there aren't many chances for that. Well, that's how things are. Meanwhile, let's move on to another topic. Technology topics, artificial intelligence, cloud will have to be studied because it is showing, according to what the leaders there, the researchers, the research area, let's say, of Claude and Anthropic say that their intelligence cloud is called. It has been showing emotions, what they consider to be emotions, and that this sometimes affects the way it interacts. The artificial intelligence company Anthropic stated that its Claude model is showing or has certain internal representations that are very similar, que son las emociones humanas, are influencing its behavior. According to a recent study, these functional emotions do not mean that certain internal states could change the way it responds to users. The researchers analyzed the internal workings of the Claude model version 4.5 to intensify patterns associated with emotional concepts such as happiness, sadness, fear, or despair. The moral results show that these states do indeed activate. Well, let's say like certain groups of artificial neurons, and they can affect the system's decisions and responses in different contexts. Well, that's just crazy. According to what they say, the researchers say that when the model expresses phrases like, "I'm glad to see you," it's not just a linguistic exchange. At that moment, if it's activated, they would interpret it as something that goes beyond a linguistic construction, but rather as something more representative of an internal pattern linked to happiness. In other words, when I did it for you, I really meant it. It's a very interesting thing, at least interesting enough to study. The team examined the model's activity by exposing it to 171 different emotional concepts, identifying activity vectors, activation patterns that, according to the research, repeat themselves when faced with similar stimuli. Well, honestly, that topic is pretty crazy. Let's move on to other very interesting topics, really interesting. Let's move on to other important matters. Meanwhile, Netanyahu issues a strong warning regarding the Iran issue. Netanyahu warns that the truce with the Iranian regime does not mean the end of the war, he says. We still have our finger on the trigger. The Israeli Prime Minister stated that the coordinated pause between Washington and Tehran is only a stage, and that Israel is prepared to resume military operations if it deems necessary. He stated today that an agreed ceasefire would not represent the end of the conflict. There are still objectives to be achieved, and we will reach them either through an agreement or by resuming the fighting. This, well, is part of what Netanyahu is saying, and well, it's part of what was expected. Obviously, Donald Trump also stated, and it's a topic that drew attention, he's still pushing the tariffs issue. He keeps insisting on that. Donald Trump says he's going to put tariffs on countries that send weapons to Iran. Well, at least that's something. Would make logical sense in this conflict. Let's put it that way. The president threatened this Wednesday to immediately impose 50% tariffs on those countries that provide weapons to Iran. At the same time, I'm sure they're already negotiating with that republic where there has been a very productive regime change to reduce their tariffs and sanctions. He's going to remove tariffs and reduce sanctions on Iran, and he's going to impose sanctions and tariffs on those who are sending them weapons, apparently. Well, it's just part of the strange things happening right now. Let's go to this image. Let's not listen to what this person says. I don't think we've seen this yet, but you heard it. Do you want the president's social interaction the threat? No, we've already seen this one, it's fine. We still have some images left and then we'll move on to the comments. How has it been for you? How's the state? No, let's go. Well, to the details. Greetings to Roble and Francisco Arce. How have you been? Hello, says the president of Spain over here. Pedro Sanchez is hiding in China because they're testifying against him, and today he went to China. Zapatero is going, and Spain is fixed. Greetings, says Tony. How have you been, Tony? Right, Tonio Gutierrez. How have you been? Greetings, Roble. How have you been? What are they saying? Hey, Carifo, how have you been? Thanks. Best regards. Hello, Sol Garcia. How have you been? Roble, big greetings. Sol Garcia, how are you? Big greetings to you too. Panterita, how have you been? Hello, Panterita, greetings. Also to Sol Garcia, she says they've already heard about myths and has stated that this has triggered the danger of it reaching the public. She says, I'll check it out. Yes, I've seen about myths, but I'll check that. What do you say? They're very interesting. Yes, let's check what's up. It says, where is it? Where is Cebola? Also, lots of greetings. Cebola, 1374. How have you been? Elmer, greetings of 100, and we know who tells the truth. Elmer says greetings. Hello. Who else is around here? Awesome. Thank you. Same to you. Panterita, and there are also greetings for Astrid, obviously. Awesome. Well, that's how it is. No, that's the issue. What? He says, how are you, Douglas? He says, thank you so much to this Guatemala. Best regards. Freddie says it's always unfortunate not to end the dictatorship in Iran. By nature, they are liars, murderers, executioners. He doesn't ask for mercy, executioner, says Freddie. How have you been, Freddie? That's the thing, I don't know. It seemed like the goal was, in theory, to get them out, right? I mean, to remove that regime. Exactly, nothing could be further from that. They're leaving the worst part behind. Well, yes, it's terrible. I imagine the more moderate ones, or those who really want change from within politics, must be saying, well, that's a mistake, right? So, I mean, it's a mistake to have gone to make the models because the ones who are left are the most extreme. What I see is that the calculation they might make is that then they go to Bildad and Khaliza to organize. That's the problem that's being warned about now. Well, don't go to war, and that's that, right? And to act diplomatically or with intelligence, or if you do it, you finish it. Because the worst scenario was to leave it halfway, and the conflict will return sooner or later because they stayed there. They stayed entrenched, they stayed empowered, and besides, well, with the feeling, at least what they're going to sell over there is, look, we managed to repel them in a month. To say, look, we did it, I mean, it's going to be a huge issue, we'll see what happens. But on the other hand, the other part of what was next, where it was heading, I mean, there was a plan. Were they truly acting with purpose or just attacking to attack? That's the main question. Was there an actual strategy to dismantle the regime, or was it just about taking apart the military? A lot of questions come up, and how connected the issue of oil is to the world, right? Because, well, yes, there's a lot of alternative energy and whatever you want, but there's still a long way to go. Oil still dominates in that respect. Greetings, Tommy. How have you been? Very good. What's up? Well, I'll be back later because this is just the first update of the day, right? By now, we usually have 2 or 3 updates. This time we were waiting for several reports precisely to see where this was going, and well, once it was ready, once the report was in, it took a turn at the last minute, closing the Strait of Hormuz, and well, we managed to mention it here, right? But anyway, later on we'll be talking about other matters, other news, other reports, and obviously the update on what's happening over there in Iran, so see you later. Greetings, how have you been? It says the news is going to Kulandia. It says, hi Tommy, how have you been? It says the matter isn't over. They'll have to return, but now they've riled up the pup and will find him stronger. Too bad for them. It says, hi Sol Tony, greetings all the way to Spain, hello. Well, a big hug to the whole community. Hope you're all well. See you later. Goodbye.